when I went off, my best friend, guy I grew up with, hunted with, in fact, we were in each other's wedding, all of that. We went off and were roommates.
All 4 years?
No, the first 2 years.
Okay.
I was in a junior college. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and he didn't know. All he was going to go was for 2 and get married, and he was out. Mm-hmm. And I went on and finished up at Furman.
So now, what's your bachelor's in?
I double majored, history and religion.
That makes sense.
You could do that at Furman in that day and time, you know. So
Did you minor? No minor with a double major.
No.
Yeah.
Double major.
Yeah.
You know, they were going to make me do a minor in this PhD that I'm doing, and I started out with a minor, but then they folded it all in and said, no, just put all of your time into your major.
So where are you with that now? I know
I'm
you
done.
submitted it.
My
it's
paper's
all.
in. I'm waiting to hear back.
You're still
from
waiting
them.
here. Yeah. It'll be good news though.
I hope. And I hope I hear soon.
And
every day goes by and you think, today, maybe they're going to let me know today.
Yeah. And are you
I've gotta
done?
No, I got to do a defense. I'll have to go
Okay.
and defend it.
All right.
But if they call and say, okay, we're ready for you to schedule your defense, I'll shout. Mm-hmm. So.
And will you have to go do that in person, or will you do that?
I
online?
don't know.
Yeah.
I just don't know. I think with that, I did my comps in Zoom, which was a little awkward. It was about 3 hours you're sitting there, and they're just throwing questions at you. I think I'd rather do this one live.
Yeah, that's a long time to be on Zoom.
It.
Yeah.
Oh, my word.
So as long as you've been in, how long have you been in school cumulatively post high school, would you say?
Okay, let's see. I had 4 years of college and then 3 years of seminary, and then I did 2 years for my DMin. No, about 3 years for my DMin, and now this PhD I've been working on for 6 years.
So around, we already established I'm not great at math, but I think I tallied 16.
That's probably
16
right.
years.
Can you believe that? The first 7 years Deb and I were married, we moved 7 times, and I was in school basically the whole time.
How'd you do that?
Oh,
were you constantly transferring?
We were in love.
Yeah.
I got married my senior year. Mm-hmm. And then I told you when I left, I went back and I took a couple of courses at Erskine, which is an Associate Reformed Presbyterian seminary school. So, and I kept my Greek up with that, and that's what I was doing. I just wanted to keep that up. And then I went on to seminary.
What are you doing, Brody?
That's,
Are we officially on?
We are officially live.
We're officially
We're
live.
live. Okay.
All right.
Let
So
me pinch myself. Am I live? Ow. Yeah.
we're here, Pastor Mike. So Pastor Kirk would out today, obviously. Otherwise, I would not be sitting here.
His brother's getting married. He
is-
left town. There was so much mail that poured in about Joe doing this that he just left
Bring
town.
her back. Bring
That's what they
her
were
back.
doing.
Yes, here I am, guys. So I thought we'd do something a little different this
Okay.
morning. Okay,
All right.
don't be scared. Don't look at my notes.
Okay, all right.
We like icebreakers over here in
Okay.
our department, like at the beginning of meetings and stuff like that. So I have some either-or questions for you.
Okay.
Okay,
Either or.
I'm just going to fire them out.
All right.
Board games or card games?
I'll card games.
Okay. Car or plane?
Plane. The older I get.
All right. Paperback book or paper books or ebooks? I think I know the answer to this one.
Hardback.
Yeah, I figured.
Hardback.
Yeah, more so than ebooks.
Yeah.
But do you use a Kindle or anything
I
or something
do.
like that? Yeah.
I do, and I've spent a ton on that.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
It can get expensive.
But it's so much easier just toting that Kindle on an airplane than a bag. For years, I hauled that bag of books around.
Right.
you know.
Right. All right. Summer or winter?
Gosh, I think I like winter.
Okay. Country or city?
Country.
Okay. Broccoli or green beans?
Green beans.
Beach or mountains? This one's good. I bet this one's tough
that's
for you.
Yeah. Boy, that's kind of right there. I'm going to go with mountains, but then I get tired of that and I want to go to the beach. So
Right.
I
Maybe a
don't
time
know.
of the year,
Yeah,
too, would dictate
yeah.
that, too. Pancakes or waffles?
Pancakes.
Morning or night?
Morning.
You're an early morning guy.
Yes.
Okay. Cake or pie?
Oh,
Or can
my
you
word.
choose?
Oh, that's too hard. It depends on what cake and what pie.
Right.
You know.
Okay, all right. We'll let you land in between on that one. Call or text?
You know, I think now I'd rather just text.
Yeah.
You know.
I think everybody's kind of moving in that
Yeah,
direction.
Yeah.
Last one, sausage or bacon?
Ooh, I just had some sausage. I guess I'll just say sausage. Although I love bacon. You know. These are tough. Now, do I get it right? Or what does that
No,
reveal?
no,
Oh, this
just
reveals about you that you are.
Oh, no, goodness, no. This is not like a personality test. I've got nothing for you.
Okay.
I just think it's interesting to ask those questions. And you're right, so many of them just depend.
Yeah, I'm right there on both of them. Like
Yeah.
country and city. I'd rather live in the country and just go to the city.
I'm with you on
rather
that.
than live in the city and go to I'd rather live in the country.
I thought when I was much, much younger, thought that I wanted to live in New York. And I went to visit New York and decided very quickly I did not want to live in New York.
You know, we just talked to a girl who's living in New York about a position, and she just does, and she's not a big city girl. She was not from a big city. But some of them go there and they just fall in love with it. And it's like, we can't imagine living anywhere else.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I can take it for 3 days and I got to get out of here.
Yeah, it's just a lot.
It is.
Like all the time.
Yeah.
All right, well, just like last time, I wasn't here yesterday
Okay.
because I was at the church Old Town, but I've listened to the sermon, listened and watched.
Did your homework.
Super thankful for our YouTube channel. Thanks, Brody, for keeping that. If you don't use our YouTube resources, you're missing out. There's a lot of really, really good stuff on there, and it gets posted
really
very
is.
quickly. So, great sermon, as always, Pastor Mac. And I don't know if you saw that we scheduled a post right after the end of the service yesterday and just asked people, hey, like, what was your takeaway? Mm-hmm. Lots of really good feedback. You know, a lot of people just said it was a good reminder of how to live in a world that, you know, well, kind of going on the last series where you just feel like alien.
Yeah.
You're an alien, and how to kind of.
Well, she sure was. I mean, she's called an exile. They're all called an exile in here 4 times in one verse.
Right.
You know, which just screams at me from the text.
And I loved what you said about the repetitiveness, because a lot of people complain about especially when they're reading the Old Testament, well, so repetitive. And I've even felt that way some more. Like when I pick up the next day, I'm like, wait a minute, did I just read this? And I look back, no, they said almost the exact same thing in the previous chapter, you know.
Well, you do that, especially when you come to 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Some places the psalmist will repeat some of the things that have been, you know. So, yeah, I guess so.
But 2 things occur to me. One is, like you said, it's being repeated for a reason.
There's a reason for it. Yeah.
And the other is, how many times are we also told to remember, especially in the Old Testament?
Yeah, get to Deuteronomy 6 and 7 and 8, and it's like, you better remember, you better remember, you better remember.
And that's for a reason, because he knows we're forgetful, and then we get easily distracted. And
you know what Luther said about that? He said, why do we need to hear the gospel every day? He said, because we forget it so quickly.
Right, I believe it. All right, so a few of my notes and questions for you. Okay. So compromise and capitulation, I actually looked that up this morning to see what the difference was between those two, because I've heard those like thrown around a lot in recent days. Do you know that? I'm sure you know the difference between the two, right?
Well, you tell me. Maybe I don't.
So compromise, we each get a little something
Yes.
out of the resolution, right?
Capitulate, you just
Capitulation
give it all
is
over.
I just say, you know
just give
what?
it all
Yeah,
over.
whatever you want, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but question I have for you is there such a thing as good compromise?
Yeah, there is, especially in politics. We would love for Washington to hear this. But when it comes to doctrinal issues, or when it comes to clear stated, you know, moral issues, you can't compromise.
Right.
You know, I can't give. It's kind of like, well, you can't give away some of those things. Some of those things you just have to stand, which is what you're going to see with Mordecai. Mordecai, who tells her, do not tell them you're a Jew. Don't let them know that, is going to turn around and he's going to say, okay, I've compromised so much that now I've got to take a stand, and taking a stand it's really going to bring some consequences. And he tells him he's a Jew. You get to chapter 3, verse 4, and in there they state he's told us that he's a Jew.
Right.
That's why he won't bow to Haman.
Yeah.
So
part of that question was just, and we talked about this a little bit a couple of weeks ago, and it's just an ongoing conversation with when you look at social media, right? What does when you're, first of all, we all know that there's not a whole lot to be gained by going back and forth with somebody on social media. But when it seems like everybody is so divided on just extreme sides of either issue, it just made me wonder, what does that look like online and in person when you could just debate and debate and debate and debate? Is there a point where
things come up in my mind from history, like Luther and Zwingli, who debated on the Lord's Supper. Luther took consubstantiation. He said that the presence of Christ was there in some form. Zwingli said, absolutely not. It's a piece of bread, it's a glass of wine, and it's nothing of that. Luther could not pull himself completely away from what he had been trained in. Of course, the Catholics believe in transubstantiation. Luther believed in consubstantiation, which it's not the full body and blood of Christ, but in some element. And they debated. And Luther was really rather ugly to Zwingli about it. Wouldn't shake his hand. At some point you can say, okay, you can believe that. I don't believe in any way that it is. But there's that conflict in history. We can be ugly in conflict, or we can disagree and be kind.
Right.
You can't always tell that on social media. You just can't. You can't hear voice inflection. You can't hear tone. You can't see facial expression, that kind of thing. That's why, in all honesty, emails and social media are a poor way to communicate.
Right.
So, and I think a lot of that gets going between people on social media because they can't tell. And then again, when I'm face to face with you, I don't think I'm going to be quite as rude and as rough to your face as sometimes we get on social media.
Right.
I think there's a little something that kind of holds you back to say, no, you got to keep this on a decent level.
Right.
Which is, as Christians, we should think about all the time. How do we come across to the rest of the world in social media? I read something by a preacher this morning. I'm just going to tell you the truth. I know the guy. Doesn't surprise me at all. But I thought to myself, that may be somebody just sort of slapped the silly off of him.
It's inflammatory?
Oh, my goodness, what he said to a lady was horrible. If his wife ought to go and just yank him up and just, but it happens, and it's so embarrassing, and so many people out there then just think, well, that we just read that into every preacher that's out
Represents everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
And it does not.
And that is why our witness is so important.
It's so important. And I forget it from time to time, and I try so hard to do better. We're all human. But how we treat each other. Esther is an absolute paragon of graciousness.
Right. I mean, how are you ever going to go wrong with being gracious?
Yes.
With being humble?
Yes.
And with being teachable?
Yes.
I can't imagine a scenario where those do not work out well for you and for those around you.
You're exactly right. My mama used to tell me every morning before I'd leave, before the kids would leave the house, I always said to my kid, be a leader. When I left the house, every morning my mama would say, manners will get you further than an education. Now, that came from a generation where my mom and dad really had very little education. But you know what? She was exactly right. manners will get you a lot further.
Kind of. I mean, it just makes sense. It's biblical.
Yep,
You know,
yep.
I told my husband Ken a couple of times this week. I was kind of sad and kind of surprised. I had a couple of different encounters out, like in a grocery store and with service people in the service industry, who said to me, "Thank you so much for being patient." And it just made me think, what are these people encountering on a daily basis? Yeah. And why do people think that treating them that way is okay or are helpful for anybody?
Yeah, you're exactly right. You know, my daughter said one time, she said, "Daddy," she said, "you should know the name of the janitor at the church as much as you know the largest giver in the congregation."
Absolutely.
Their name, you know, who they are. And
Absolutely.
she's exactly right.
Yep.
And you do not treat one any differently than the other.
Exactly.
Well, there's Esther again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she found favor in the eyes of all who saw her.
Right.
So.
Also, I wanted to tell you especially the part about humility reminded me of one of my favorite verses, and I remember so clearly when I came across this, or when it really impacted me for the first time when I was a teenager, and that is 2 Corinthians 4:7, that says, "But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that surpassing power belongs to God and not to us." That was humbling, but also empowering to me to know that regardless of my state, my failings, that God is able to use me and work in me.
And that's the grace of God. And that really was the whole point that I kept driving toward yesterday, was to get to verse 17 and say, look at how this king responded to her. Why did he do that? That was the grace of God.
Mm-hmm.
That was God pouring grace out on Esther right there.
Right.
And that's what, and I hope this came across as well, is the reason why she was so gracious is that down on the inside, she had experienced God's grace.
Mm-hmm.
She knew the grace of God. Look, her parents had died, and here was a cousin, here was her uncle's cousin who took her and brought her in and reared her just like a daughter. That was the grace of God in her life. In a horrible, sad, tragic, terrible moment, God's grace provided for her. Now this, my uncle's cousin. Now this is way on down the road here, on down the hereditary line, so to speak. Obviously, there was not anybody else to take her, but this family did. So she had experienced the grace of God.
Right.
And then she turned around and she expressed it. Even in this girl was put into a horrible situation. I don't think we think about this. She was put into, and I kept comparing it to the sex trade. I don't know how else you would see it.
Right.
You go out, you round up 400 different young girls, and you bring them in here, and that's the sole purpose for their being there.
Right.
And the sad thing is once they were with this king, one night, they were forever relegated to a life of being closed off from the rest of the world.
I mean, true slavery.
Yeah. Never again, because they could never go out and date a young guy. They could never fall in love with a young guy. They could never get married. They could never have children. They could never start a home. They were kept like calves in a pen.
Mm-hmm. And to think that God can work in that. And he does it all the time, if we allow him to.
Yeah. And that's in that terrible situation that God is moving and working.
Right. It's so powerful. I had a question for you about the humility and authenticity aspect.
Okay.
I think that this is more of a, maybe not a struggle, but just something to think about when it comes to especially the Southern culture.
Right.
And it comes to authenticity.
Right.
Is there a balance with that? I've heard resistance to some people as far as like sharing what's going on in their lives, asking people for prayer, how open and authentic they feel like they can be, because maybe there's like this decorum that needs to be kept as well. What does that look like for you for really Christians?
That's true. That's the world I grew up in, I'll give you an example, and I don't mean this to be controversial. all of the things that are coming out now, well, this person was abused by this person, in the church. My wife was abused by a Baptist deacon when she was a little girl, a number of times. And today, in that day and time, you kept everything quiet. Mm-hmm. You didn't want stuff out. Mm-hmm. And I think that had a lot to do with the culture we were in. Today, it's go blab everything in the world, just spread it out there. We want to make it public. I guess it's kind of like I'm hurt and I want to make you hurt as well. Well, something should be done about it. Mm-hmm. But I was reared in that, mm-hmm. where you didn't go out and talk about it. You would not go out and say something of it. As horrible as that is, you did not.
Right.
But that was Southern culture. Mm-hmm. And I think we go too much the other way now. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to air out my whole dirty laundry right here in front of everybody, and it's as much for shock value as anything else.
Right.
Let me see if I can just shock you with how big a victim I am.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know that is what I'm getting to with the idea of authenticity.
Okay.
Authenticity is more of me just being me. Mm-hmm. Now, that does not mean at the same time, well, I'm just going to be me. I'm going to tell you what I think.
Right.
No. She was authentic in that she was gracious to everybody. Mm-hmm. She was authentic in that she found favor. She was pleasing to people. She was a joy to be around. Mm-hmm. She was pleasant to be around. She brought a smile to your face. That, I think, is what I'm saying with authentic.
Okay.
Not that, well, this is me, take it, here I come in and I'm in, ripped up jeans and a baggy sweatshirt and I hadn't had a bath in 2 weeks. And this is just me. No, right. I think I'd want a cleaned up version of you.
Right.
You can be authentic without pouring all the garbage out. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what she is.
Right.
She doesn't put on airs. When she goes in for her evening with the king, she doesn't take anything else. She doesn't try to be, who can I say, Madonna. Mm-hmm. She doesn't try to be Cyndi Lauper. She doesn't try to be Miley Cyrus. Mm-hmm. She's herself.
Right.
And I think that's what wins his heart.
Sure.
Because he's had all these others go in there and they try to be Hollywood.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I wanted to tell you a funny story about it's a very short funny story, but the Something Beautiful song mm-hmm. that you referenced at the end. I remember as a kid, you know how sometimes you sing songs, you hear songs, and you think you know what you're singing about, and then you realize later on in life. I always thought that was a song about somebody getting married. Something borrowed, something blue. Yes. I remember thinking that when I was a kid, and I was like, this is such a pretty song, but I'm not sure why we're singing this in church. I get it now, though. And I loved you referencing that.
Gaither wrote that?
It certainly sounds like it.
Gaither.
Yeah.
That may be what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I started to lapse into buttons and bows, but it just didn't fit.
You could do now.
And buttons and bows.
All right. Anything else? I know that Kirk likes to give you a hard time when you go long, and you were 50 minutes yesterday. But was there any? I don't know what I can do. No, it was so good, Pastor Mike. Is there anything else that you wanted to expound on, though, or that maybe that people ask you about after the fact that you wanted to address?
No, I'm trying to think. Sometimes some people will come up with some really good, hey, I saw this. Did you see this? I've had this question or that question. But no, I didn't get that. The teachableness in there, I think, is important for every one of us. Mm-hmm. I try to remain teachable. That's why I'm still in school. I can hear my daddy right now saying, son, are you ever going to get an education? When I went back for my first doctorate, that's what he said, gosh, are you ever going to get an education? But I think being teachable is incredibly important. That's an important lesson as well. I just come away from Esther, and That's why I think you're drawn to the book. I think this young girl still draws you because of who she is at the core of her life. Is somebody who is a joy to be around and is gracious.
Right. It's a good
And
model.
she is going to become a picture of a Savior. Which is what God is doing in this.
When God tells a story.
Whole messed up stuff right here is it's like playing chess. And God is about 6 or 8 moves down the road. And he's putting things that you cannot. Why did they make that move? Why did this move? Why that move? And then when all of a sudden there's a move and it's checkmate, oh gosh, you can see the whole plan all along.
And we don't always get to see that this side of heaven, but
That's
man,
right.
when we do, what
yeah.
a revelation.
That's why
is.
we're born on this side of the cross, and we look back at this stuff. It ought to just produce awe in us as to what God has done.
Yes.
In history.
And through so many different types of people.
So many different types of people. Yeah.
All right. So
Good.
where are we headed this Sunday? We're talking about Esther.
Mordecai and Haman. You know, Mordecai saves Xerxes' life. Xerxes has lost this battle now in Greece, comes back home in defeat, and it's going to stir in these Persians there. We're gonna replace him. We're embarrassed. We're going to replace him. We're going to take his life. And so some of his closest bodyguards are plotting to take his life. Mordecai, now this is the question we're never told. You know, the Bible never tells you a lot of stuff. You just want to know, how did he know that? How did he find that out? Mordecai finds it out. Some way, we don't know. And he warns Xerxes through Esther.
Right.
So, but Mordecai is never promoted, but Haman is. Mordecai, by the way, is a descendant of Benjamin, and Saul was a descendant of Benjamin, and he was the first king, and he was told, you wipe out these Agagites, which is what Haman, he doesn't do it.
Wow.
You follow the Agagites through the Old Testament, which we'll do a little bit this Sunday.
Awesome. Sounds like another good one.
Good.
Thanks,
Anyway.
Pastor Mac.
Good. Thank you.
All right.
Glad
Y'all
you're
have a
here.
great Monday.
See ya.
Somebody will see you next week with Pastor Mac. Probably not me.
Which one of you is going to do the kick?
I'll do it.
Will
Fine.
not be me.
There you
Just-
go. Got it.